You can't even cook properly. Bring me my food now. Arlo stormed into the kitchen, his expression darkening as his eyes fell on the unfinished dishes. You're driving Mom crazy with your carelessness, he added, his voice sharp with accusation. At that moment, a precarious stack of plates slipped off the edge of the counter, crashing to the floor in a loud, chaotic mess of broken shards. Arlo's face remained disturbingly calm. This is your fault, you shouldn't have stacked them like that, he said flatly before turning on his heel and walking out of the kitchen without another word. The sound of shattering dishes brought my father-in-law rushing in. His eyes immediately scanned the scene, then settled on me. Are you okay? He asked, his tone a mix of concern and confusion, but as our gazes locked, his expression shifted to something unreadable. I'm going to speak with my wife about this. You should come, too, he said, his voice low and unfamiliar, sending an unsettling chill down my spine. My name is Helen Davis, and I'm 32 years old. I've been married to Arlo, who is 3 years older than me, for nearly a year. Our marriage still feels like it falls into the newlywed phase, though living with my mother-in-law since the wedding has made it anything but blissful. Before our marriage, I worked as an outpatient nurse at a small pediatric clinic. A few months ago, I transferred to a general hospital in the same city to expand my skills. The work is demanding, but I love it, until I come home to Tiana, my mother-in-law. Arlo insisted we live with his mother because he worried about her being alone. His father worked out of town most days. Initially, I thought the arrangement would bring us closer, that we could help one another. I couldn't have been more wrong. Helen, you're terrible, Tiana barked at me one morning after my first night shift at the new hospital. I had worked from midnight until 8:30 a.m., a grueling schedule I wasn't yet used to. Exhausted and lightheaded, I walked through the door, hoping for a moment of peace, but Tiana was already yelling. You didn't even make me breakfast. What are you thinking? She demanded. What breakfast? I asked, still half asleep. I made some last night before work. Did Arlo eat it all? My explanation didn't calm her. Instead, she doubled down, criticizing me until I reluctantly shuffled into the kitchen to prepare her another meal. You're so inflexible and exhausting, she muttered as I set the food in front of her. She barely took a bite before wrinkling her nose. Too salty. I bit back my frustration and turned to head upstairs, eager for even a short nap. Where are you going? Tiana snapped, halting me in my tracks. You still have dishes to clean. Tiana, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I just got off an 8-hour shift. Could you handle them this time? Huh, what are you talking about? Cleaning up is part of cooking. Besides, I left the laundry for you, too. You're Arlo's wife, aren't you? And you don't even have kids. What could you possibly be so tired from? I swallowed my exhaustion and got to work, scrubbing dishes and tackling the pile of laundry she'd left. Lately, Tiana's subtle, and not so subtle, hints about grandchildren had grown impossible to ignore. Arlo is an only child, so it's up to you, she'd remind me regularly. You know, my friend's daughter-in-law conceived during their honeymoon, and another already has 3 children. I'm so jealous. When will I get to meet my grandchildren? It's not that I don't want a baby, I do, but despite supplements, doctor visits, and even a visit to a fertility shrine, we haven't had any luck. Finally, after completing Tiana's endless list of demands, I mustered up the courage to bring up fertility treatment with Arlo. The doctor said we need to go together to make a treatment plan. I explained one evening. Can you free up your Saturday morning? I asked him. What? Arlo looked at me, startled. What's that? I've never heard of it before. You told me to go to the hospital because you were worried about us not having children, I reminded him. I did say that, but why do I have to go? He asked, irritation flickering in his tone. Arlo, fertility treatment requires both the husband and the wife. I explained patiently. The doctor said your reproductive health is just as important as mine. They'll need to check your semen to make sure everything's normal. But he cut me off. Why don't you do that alone? It's none of my business, he said dismissively. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my voice. It is your business. This is about us. Every time I see your mom, she asks me why we don't have children yet. Arlo's expression darkened. Don't you dare speak badly about my mother. This is your fault because you're infertile. Fix it. I need your cooperation to fix it, I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. The doctor said a semen analysis is essential for fertility testing. I'm healthy, And there's no problem with me, Arlo shot back, his voice cutting. We have a good marriage, and I have plenty of sperm. There's no need for a test. Then prove it, I challenged, trying to keep my frustration in check. He glared at me, retreating under the covers. How would you like it if one of your colleagues saw you in a place like that? Are you trying to humiliate me? I'm not going, and that's final. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at him as he turned his back to me. Was it something I said? Did I approach this the wrong way? I sighed deeply, feeling defeated and alone. Working as a nurse means irregular shifts are part of the job. My new position came with a 3-shift system, day, late night, and semi-night shifts. On average, I worked 4 or 5 late-night shifts and 8 semi-night shifts each month. The challenge wasn't the hospital schedule, though. It was the constant demands my mother-in-law made when I was home. Nurses are supposed to get a day off after night shifts, but in this house, there were no breaks. Between the cleaning, cooking, and endless tasks Tiana assigned me, I was always on my feet. If I'd known it would be like this, I never would have taken the job. Tiana's criticisms had grown harsher with time. When Arlo and I first got married, she was surprisingly easygoing and never pressured me about housework. I couldn't help but think her attitude shifted because of our fertility struggles. Physically, I had changed too. When we married, I was healthy, even slightly plump. Now, I was gaunt and pale, my energy drained, but neither Arlo nor Tiana seemed to notice. Maybe the change was too gradual, or maybe they just didn't care. One summer day, Arlo walked into the room, smiling brightly. We're celebrating Mom's 60th birthday this Sunday, he announced. She's excited to invite some friends, so I need you to handle the preparations. He handed me a piece of paper. It was a detailed list in Tiana's handwriting, with names of guests, their contact information, and a full menu. She'd even specified the tableware, the liquor brands, and the exact order in which the food should be served. I scanned the list, stunned. 10 people, I blurted out. This much food for just 10 people, and it's Sunday, that's right after my late-night shift. Arlo shrugged, his tone calm. Mom said that day works best for her. You'll be fine, you're always up until noon anyway. The celebration's at noon, so it won't be an issue. With that, he left the room, oblivious to my rising frustration. I knew they wouldn't help me, I was certain of it. The morning of Tiana's 60th birthday arrived. As always, I came home from a late-night shift feeling woozy. Still, I did what was expected. I'd done the laundry and cleaning the night before, leaving only the cooking and setup. My hands moved on autopilot as I prepped the feast, my body screaming for rest. But there was no rest here. There never was. The day had already gone sideways. My husband had eaten some of the groceries I bought for the party, forcing me to run to the store again. By the time I returned, the guests were already arriving, one after another. While my impeccably dressed mother-in-law graciously welcomed them, I scrambled to prepare drinks, set out glasses, and organize appetizers. My hands moved quickly, but I was already behind. The pressure mounted as I hurried to finish the main course. "What are you doing, Helen? You're late," Arlo barked from the living room, clearly acting on his mother's request. Moments later, he stormed into the kitchen, his brow furrowed at the sight of the half-prepared dish. "You can't even get the food ready on time. Bring it out now, you're making Mom mad," he snapped, grabbing a bottle of wine before disappearing again. As I turned back to the table, disaster struck. A precariously stacked pile of plates slid off the edge, crashing to the floor in a cacophony of shattering porcelain. My heart sank. They were my mother-in-law's favorite dishes. Arlo reappeared briefly, his face calm as he glanced at the mess. "That's your fault. You shouldn't have stacked them like that," he said coolly before walking out, offering no help. I crouched down, sweeping up the shards, frustration and exhaustion bubbling beneath the surface. "Why is it always me?" I thought bitterly. "What happened?" a gentle voice asked. Startled, I looked up to see Douglas, my father-in-law, standing in the doorway. He was holding a large package, his face lined with concern. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his kindness catching me off guard. "No, I'm fine," I replied quickly, though his genuine care made tears prick at my eyes. He stepped into the kitchen, surveying the chaotic scene. His eyes landed on the mountain of food and dishes waiting to be served. "Did you do all this yourself?" he asked in disbelief. I nodded, letting out a hollow laugh. "Who else would?" Douglas's gaze lingered on me, noticing the dark circles under my eyes, my pale skin, and my trembling hands. The cheerful, lively woman he'd met at the wedding was gone. His expression darkened. "I'm going to have a word with my wife," he said firmly. "You're coming with me." I hesitated, glancing at the broken plates. "I haven't finished cleaning up." "You don't need to. Come on," he insisted, guiding me out of the kitchen. The living room buzzed with laughter as Tiana entertained the guests. Her wineglass in hand, she turned to us, her smile faltering as she noticed Douglas at my side. "Ah, there you are," she exclaimed nervously. "Everyone, this is my husband, Douglas. He works out of town and came home just for me today." Douglas smiled warmly at the guests. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate my wife's birthday. I'm Douglas," he said. Then, his tone shifted, sharp and cutting. "And my foolish wife is grateful for your hospitality." Tiana let out a forced laugh. "Douglas, you're calling me foolish on my birthday?" "You are foolish," he replied flatly, his words striking like a hammer. The room fell silent, the jovial atmosphere evaporating in an instant. Douglas placed a steady hand on my shoulder, keeping me by his side despite my attempt to retreat. "I'd like to introduce my son's wife, Helen," he said, his voice commanding attention. "She's busy, Douglas," Tiana interrupted hastily, her smile brittle. Douglas shot her a withering look, silencing her. "This young woman married my son a year and a half ago," he continued. "She was bright, cheerful, and full of life, but look at her now. This isn't the woman I met." The guests murmured amongst themselves, some whispering, "She looks so frail," and "nothing like her wedding photos." Douglas turned to Tiana, his voice low but firm. "What happened to her, Tiana? Why has she changed so much?" Tiana shifted uncomfortably. "Well, she started working at a new hospital with night shifts. It's probably just the stress from her job." Douglas cut her off. "Is that so? Then every nurse at her hospital should look like this. If that's true, it's a violation of labor laws, and I'll be contacting the union immediately." "No, it's not like that," Tiana stammered. Douglas's anger simmered as he gestured toward me. "Don't play dumb. I heard everything. You've been treating Helen like a servant, giving her no rest. She worked a late-night shift, came home exhausted, and you still made her do everything for your party." Tiana opened her mouth to protest, but Douglas wasn't done. He turned to Arlo. "And you, Arlo, you knew this was happening. Why didn't you step in?" Arlo shifted uncomfortably. "It's between Helen and Mom. It's not my place to interfere." Douglas's voice rose. "Not your place? What did you vow at your wedding? To love and protect her, or to stand by while your mother breaks her spirit?" "Well, Mom said this is normal for a woman without kids," Arlo muttered defensively. Douglas's expression hardened. "That's the same excuse you gave in your first marriage, and look how that ended." I froze, my mind reeling. I knew Arlo had been divorced, but I had no idea it was because his ex-wife had been treated like this. Tiana, feeling cornered, suddenly snapped. "Well, she doesn't have children. This is the kind of work she should be doing." Douglas's voice cut through the room like a blade. "If that's what you think, Tiana, you're more foolish than I imagined. It's been over a year since they got married, and she still hasn't had a baby. She's an unfit wife," Tiana sneered, her tone dripping with contempt. Douglas's eyes darkened, his voice icy. "Even if she were infertile, how dare you blame her? Infertility isn't a moral failing, and your words reveal just how misplaced your frustrations are." "How dare you?" Tiana shot back, her voice rising. "You've been gone for so long, what do you know? You have no idea how it feels to be surrounded by friends flaunting their grandchildren while I have none. I'm lonely. I want a grandchild as soon as possible." Her voice cracked, and tears streamed down her face. For a fleeting moment, sympathy stirred within me, but it was quickly overshadowed by the months of cruelty and exhaustion she had inflicted. Her tears couldn't erase the pain she had caused, nor could they justify her behavior toward me, or her treatment of Arlo's ex-wife. I took a step forward, meeting her tear-filled gaze with calm resolve. "I don't think you'll be getting grandchildren anytime soon." From my pocket, I pulled out a stack of papers and handed them to her. "These are the results from the fertility clinic: blood tests, AMH levels, uterine and fallopian tube drainage tests, anti-sperm antibody tests. Every result came back normal. My body is healthy and capable of having children." If Arlo's ex-wife went through the same thing, Don't you think the real issue is obvious? My voice grew sharper as I turned to Arlo. The problem is you. Arlo's face turned pale. What are you saying? That can't be true, he stammered. I folded my arms, refusing to let him off the hook. You had a feeling, didn't you? That's why you refused to get tested. Instead of taking responsibility, you let your mother blame me while you stood by and treated me like a servant. Taking a deep breath, I softened my tone, though it carried a weight of finality. I loved you, Arlo. I even tried to protect your feelings by keeping this to myself. But after everything, the yelling, the neglect, the way you and your mother have worn me down, I don't care anymore. Wait, Helen, let's talk about this, Arlo pleaded, his voice frantic. It's not true, I can't be. Then prove it, get tested. I shook my head and turned away. But it won't matter anymore. This marriage is over. I walked out of the room without a backward glance. Behind me, I could hear Arlo's panicked protests mingling with Tiana's sobs. The murmurs of departing guests echoed faintly as I closed the door behind me. The divorce was handled swiftly through an attorney. Arlo tried desperately to reconcile, but thanks to Douglas's recording of the confrontation that day, the abuse I endured was undeniable. The evidence made the proceedings clear-cut. When Arlo finally underwent medical testing, it confirmed he had oligospermia, a low sperm count. Tiana was livid, directing all her anger at him once the truth came out. The fallout didn't stop there. My ex-in-law's relationship crumbled. Unable to face the humiliation and isolation from her social circle, Tiana moved into public housing with Arlo, their reputations in shambles. At work, Arlo became the subject of ridicule as whispers of his treatment of me spread among his colleagues. Months later, life had taken a brighter turn. Douglas, who had offered me heartfelt apologies for not recognizing the situation sooner, introduced me to a kind, dependable man who worked under him. We began dating, and after 6 months, we got married. Not long ago, during a routine checkup, I received incredible news. I'm 2 months pregnant. My husband and I are overjoyed, eagerly anticipating the arrival of our first child. I plan to visit Douglas soon to share the happy news. He played a pivotal role in helping me escape that suffocating life and find the happiness I never thought I'd have again.